Yeah, well, Mario, I'm not quite sure that, well, in a way it's good to have this debate, but I think the problem for many of us is that we are going back to basics on this debate. Because there are so many other important issues to discuss. For example, let's say devolution, but in a way I find while the debate is going on, this is distracting from that. Now, also ironically, the argument has been made that the very championing of constitutionalizing ESC rights goes against the principle of devolution. I mean, that is one of the major arguments that's been made by critics on the basis that devolution of power should leave the provincial authorities, to the authorities at the periphery to decide on these policies on their own. In other words, there has to be a discretionary element, and there ought not to be this, rights based compulsion on that. Whereas, I mean, the whole idea of devolution is, increasing the level of democracy and participation and winning rights. But as Sunil very correctly said, I think there is all, the basic idea of devolution for some is about creating a political class there, a certain political elite.
20-year experience of devolution in the rest of the country. Just go and study what has happened with those.
Exactly.
I did a study on, say, Kandy. I mean, same particular forces of the class forces, political forces, operated in these other 8 provinces. So, just because you give power there, that it doesn't mean that, yes, they have certain power, but why not add another element to it so that is not only serves a elite.
Absolutely. So that is exactly the argument, that there should be overarching constitutional principles that, all units of government are obligated to respect and to protect. So these are the sort of internal contradictions in a way of this, current debate. And I also agree, if we say rights are about life experiences, perhaps, these arguments against economic and social rights, I quite agree with you, come about because of a lack of experience. Not really understanding, the challenges that people face on a day-to-day basis. So I think, the basics, there will have to be a sort of introduction to the fundamental problems of people. That's very important. The other is about transitional justice. I think in Sri Lanka, sometimes the discussions on transitional justice can be very difficult. I think we've got to go to the genesis of violence in this country. If you look at the 71 insurrection, if you look at the uprising in the north, you do find socio-economic factors, it is really the fundamental, so therefore I think it's really about, addressing the genesis of, the violence in this country. And not only, of course, transitional justice is connected with that, but I think it's more about exploring, why things went wrong in this country with very strong welfare approach. Literacy was very high in this country, at the time when violence came about, but it was, more about sharing so many other things and being entitled to it. So there's something that struck me that was, about a comment that a Colombian professor of constitutional law made. He was invited, I think by the Commonwealth, to speak to parliamentarians who were involved in this process. And one of the things he said, it was very eloquent, one of the things he said is that post-conflict Colombia, you see the constitutionalization of economic and social rights has created a sort of constitutional patriotism. I mean, constitutional patriotism is used in various ways, but the idea that the Constitution delivers social justice is really a very strong point to create faith in a constitutional order, especially in a politically divided society, just not the basic civil and political rights discourse. So I think all these issues ought to be there. So the misgiving one has really is that we have to go back to basics, when we could have had a much more sophisticated, like the political discussion we should have had, and now we are going back to basics, the legal arguments and so on and so forth. Yes, thank you. One other point, it's also about this the dimension of creating constitutional fiscal responsibility via ESC, economic and social rights. In other words, expenditure, public expenditure, it's, even the criteria on which public expenditure is based, when it's rights oriented, I think it's very strong. It's extremely strong. So, for example, when you have 11% or 12% by way of defense, allocation, the budgetary allocation, and you're fighting for 6% for education, and maybe health is another, I don't know, maybe 4% or something like that. I mean, then we ask the question. Then also the sort of extreme level of discretion there appears to be on, let's say, certain types of expenditure on perks of, the establishment, the authorities and so on. Then clearly has to be, that discretion clearly has to be controlled and will be controlled when there is ESC rights. So that's something I think we have got to also emphasize.